his own great snorting beast, master of it all, the rails opening up ahead of him, opening, always opening. He sits, pasha-like, on the roof of a train climbing to the top of the world, till he is chilled to the bone and has to crawl back in. Big Ten is awake. We in Colorado yet? No telling. It's just mountains. Never cared for the mountains, says the big Indian, rolling up on an elbow. We're lake people. Paddled your canoes. Big Ten narrows an eye. Yeah, we did that. By the shores of Gitchigumi, Hod recites. By the shining big sea water, Gitchigami. What? You know, Ojibwe, Gitchigami, Lake Superior. You're shitting me. So the poem is a load of manure. You ever try to read it? The whole thing? Hell no. For one thing, Hiawatha was an Iroquois. Got nothing to do with us. But your people hunting fish. Lots of that, yeah. Take some scalps. Hod means it as a joke, but the Indian doesn't smile. That's the Sioux. We sent them packing before the white people showed up. My brothers and me used to look for arrowheads, says Hod, when we were supposed to be plowing. Yeah, we did that too. You'd be surprised how many you find laying around where Indian people live. You got an Indian name? Big Ten nods and says something with too many sounds to pick apart. What's that mean in English? Walks far, says the Indian, stretching and sitting up, but would prefer to ride. Hod settles back in on the huge bags of fleece. What did you hunt? Whatever was around. Birds paid the best. You shot birds? Hod tries to imagine hitting a flying crow with an arrow. There was a white fella had a summer house out on Madeline Island, says Big Ten. Called him Colonel Archibald. Don't know if he was a real colonel, but he lost a leg in the war. Ornery son of a gun. Once or twice a year, the wild pigeons would come in and feed, the big flock. Cover the woods halfway to Iron County. Branches bust from the weight of them, birds shit up to your ankles on the ground. First time I seen it as just a chap, I thought it was the end of the world and run home crying. All them beaks and wings. They come over our farm once, says Hod. My brother Luke and I killed a dozen just throwing up rocks into the air. Big Ten nods. We helped my father drag the fishnets in. He'd rig them up this way he had. What you do is catch one and tie his leg to a stake in the ground with a mess of grain scattered around. He'll eat a little, flap around a little bit, eat a little more. See, a pigeon got no more sense than a farmhand. Big Ten smiles bitterly. The rest of that flock will see him and come down to get what he's feeding on, and that's when you trip the nets. We'd catch 300-400 a day like that. We didn't have nothing like the rigs the professional birdmen did. Me and my brother's job was to pull them out one by one and pin their wings so we could bring them out on the ferry to the colonel. Alive? Of course alive. He wouldn't pay for dead ones. What's a man do with that many pigeons? Shot them. He let us watch sometimes. Him and his friends would get to drinking, and then this half-breed fella that worked for him, Petey, would load a bird into the trap and snip their wings free, and then the old boy would yell, "Pull!" for Petey to spring that catapult trap. And sometimes the pigeon would just flop out with a broken neck, but mostly they would start off on the wing and bam! The colonel or one of his friends or all of them shooting together would blow it apart with buckshot. Big Ten frowns at the memory. They killed a whole lot of them we bought between lunch and supper time. Hod feels a hard pain just behind his right eye. Air getting thin, he thinks, or just hungry again. Any ever get away? The pigeons? Big Ten shrugs. Oh, now and then. They're beautiful flyers, fast, like what an arrow must have looked like back when Indians shot arrows. Me and my brothers would holler and cheer when one flew off clear, and the colonel would call us a pack of damn ignorant savages and threaten to pepper our hides. We'd run and hide then, wait until they all fallen asleep on the screen porch so we could sneak back and fetch some of the broke-necked ones home to eat. The rest had too much shot in them to bother with. They tasted good, pigeons, what I remember. Tasted fine. Hod's stomach does a turn, and he tries to remember when he last ate. He has a hunk of yesterday's bread, but it isn't so big, and half of it will be smaller. He wonders if the birds that got away found another flock, or if they just stayed scattered, lost. Big Ten stretches, yawns. Yeah, I was a regular little wild Indian. Went barefoot every summer up until the Sisters of Perpetual Adoration got hold of me. He pauses, listening for a moment. We're going downhill now. Feels like it. It is cold in the boxcar now, hot, and Big Ten can see their own breath as they divide Hod's bread from the Saints and a tin of sardines the Indian bought in Lehigh. This Sister Ursula, says Big Ten, she took a shine to me, figured I could be an example to my people. Mostly, when there is someone in the boxcar with you, their story is pretty much the same as yours and poor entertainment. Hard times, low pay, dumb bosses, no hope. Except for the cranks and bughouse escapees who all have their version of the big picture. You'd better stay awake and close to the exit. Example of what? Asked Hod. We could talk English instead of just Ojibwe and French like my father. That we could be taught to act civilized enough not to make the white people nervous. That we could cut all our trees down and put up some sorry excuse for a farm. She run the school, this Ursula? Your General Custer had some of them Franciscan nuns with him, says Big Ten. You still have his hair. German ladies mostly. Lift you clear off the ground by your ears. You learn to read. I learned every damn thing they want me to. That way they never shame you in front of the other ones. They both have pulled scraps of raw fleece to wrap themselves in now. Wool side turned in. It is dark up top, and it's been a long way since the train last stopped. When I learnt everything they had to tell me, Sister Ursula put me on the train to the industrial school in Pennsylvania. Your father let him do that? My father was mostly a white man to look at him, French and Irish, but he lived Indian his whole life. When the government started the allotments in '87, the agent says, Armand, that was his white name. Armand, he says, you don't get no quarter section because you can't prove you're an Indian. That means none of his sons get their 40 acres because even though my mother's a direct line down from old Chief Buffalo, that makes us half-breeds, which their status was yet to be figured out. He tried to cheat me. Tried nothing. There was folks never seen that lake before who showed up claiming they was eligible for an allotment. Same ones standing in line with money in their paws when the surplus land got sold off. White people. All different colors, just like us. But they sure wasn't Ojibwe. Anyhow, my father gone to Père Clochard and says, what can you do? And the Père says, well, if you had a boy at this Carlisle school, he would be qualified for an allotment and the annuity payments from the old treaty and be awarded the state, which would make you an Indian ex post facto, which is Latin for the cat is already out of the bag. I was the youngest and the one you could spare the easiest, and Sister Ursula was champing at the bit for me to go, so he borrowed Charlie Whitebird's wagon and team and took me down to Eau Claire for the train. They put me on a special car and it was all Indian kids, boys and girls, Blackfeet kid and Gros Ventre kids and Sioux kids and lots more Ojibwe from Minnesota. And then we took on a load of Oneida kids from up by Green Bay. And that's when I first seen Gracie Metoxen. Big Ten shakes his head. All the things I went through at that school, the only thing I ever had on my mind was her. Hod lets this sit for a moment. The food is gone, and he is still hungry. I could speak English and been around white people plenty already, but them horse Indians from out west, they was scared. The first thing when we got to the industrial school is they put us through the barbers and cut all our hair off. The Sioux boys got all upset because this meant their parents must have died. And then they took our clothes and had us wear these soldier-looking uniforms. No, an Ojibwe, says Big Ten, wiggling to burrow between two sacks of fleece, got about as much to do with a Mohawk or a Crow as a Dutchman does with a Hawaiian. And every one of them tribes think they got a direct line to the Great Spirit, and all the others is just dogs with two legs. So you can imagine it wasn't no picnic when they stuck you in a room where none of the other three boys talked your language. So you'd have to speak English. That was the idea. Seems reasonable. I throw you in a room with an Italian, a Swede, and a Polak, and say you got to talk Chinese, how you like it? To save the man, says Big Ten, putting his hand over his heart to quote, you got to kill the Indian. That was the motto of the fellow who started up the school, and they'd done their level best, believe me. The first day, if you don't already have a white name, you got to go up to a blackboard and point one off a list. So in my room there was Jeremiah Foxcatcher and Clarence Red Cloud and Henry Yamatewa and me. Clarence was there mostly like a hostage to keep his old man and uncles on the reservation with the rest of the pacified Sioux. Hod gives Big Ten a once-over. If you didn't notice, he never had to shave. He could almost pass for white, black Irish maybe, with his hair cut short under that bowler and skin no more burnt than Hod's from a month in the fields. There was a boy my first year, Piegan boy from Montana, got so down he hung himself. That ain't no way for an Indian to die. Big Ten has his arms wrapped around himself, rocking slowly as he speaks. I would have done the same if it wasn't for Gracie. She was pretty. She had the life spirit. They let the girls keep most of their hair, had them in their own kind of uniform dresses, which wasn't so nice. Whenever I seen her, she smiled, and it lifted me right up off the ground. Boys that age, all I could ever think of to say was, how you doing? And always she would give me that smile and say, I am getting better every day. That was the other motto at the school. They had it written on top of all the blackboards, and it was in every other sentence in the newspaper we put out. We are getting better every day. You stay in a place 4 or 5 years, you get better every day, you get an idea how bad you must have been to start with. You were there that long? I ain't proud of it, says Big Ten. Hod feels the train start to slow. No brakes yet, but they are on flat ground, and the bursts of steam outside are more sighs than snorts. Big Ten doesn't seem to notice. The last night I was there, we got to talking in the room, and Clarence Red Cloud says how he wants to go home, and Foxcatcher says it's the same for him. And then Henry, who's from one of them blanket tribes down in the Southwest Territories, he says he goes all the time. Now Henry is a fella can go months without he says a single word, and we know he don't go home, even on the vacations they give us, Christian holidays, because he don't have the jack for the train fare, and they don't trust him to come back. So we start to riding him a little, especially Foxcatcher, because his Apache's got a long feud with these Hopis. And Henry gets riled and brings out this package his people sent him from the Mission P.O. down there. He dumps out these little cactus buttons on his bed, and Foxcatcher's eyes get big, and he says, I know what those are. You want to go someplace, chew on one of these, says Henry Yamatewa. Well, you know how young fellas is. They get together, someone lays down a dare. There wasn't any spines on these buttons. They've been pulled up and dried, and I chewed down 4 or 5 of them before I felt a thing, other than Henry's people must have an awful lot of time on their hands to bother with this nonsense. And then I got sicker than a dog and lay on the floor holding my stomach in. So why do they? For their religion, you're supposed to see things. Things. Visions. Indian stuff. Eagles and snakes. Hopi things if you're a Hopi. Navajo things if that's what you are. Me, I just left. He ran away. I flew. They're coming to a rest. A wave of sound rolling back as the couplings knock together. I flew out the window. We were on the 2nd floor. Flew across the parade ground, not flapping my arms or anything, just your body lifts up and goes wherever you think. So I flew in through the window of the girls' dormitory, and Gracie Matoxin was there, warm and smiling in her bed, awake while all the other girls were sleeping, waiting for me, smiling that smile. But she was too heavy to carry away. So I just lay with her for a while, and then right before the sun come up, I flew out the window again and never stopped. Voices pass outside the boxcar. If they start to open the door, thinks Hod, we can burrow down into the sheep's wool to hide. You went home? Big Ten shakes his head. First thing they do if you run, they wire the Indian agent where you live, and he puts the law out on you. If you're a ward of the state, and you leave Carlisle without they let you, you're an outlaw. I just kept